Hey everyone, it is Rolly, and we're 1 week in to this challenge. So we are on day 7, and so this one is a tough one. Um, and you can actually look at this one a little bit differently depending on what it is that you are interpreting. So it could be physically where you grew up, so with your home, with your family, that kind of thing. But I'm going to tackle it in to a physical space. And so um, I was born in Timmins, and then when I was 10, or on like just before I turned 10, so when I was 9, I moved to, no, I was 10. I was going to be 11. So I moved to this area, and so, and then I moved away again, and I moved to North Bay. I lived in North Bay for 3 years, and then I moved back. And so my, um, the way that I'm actually going to view it is going to be with the um, the place that I live is compared from Timmins to here. So so where I grew up. And so, because it's what are you grateful for about the place that you grew up is the question, is the prompt for today. So what I'm grateful for is because moving here was not something that I was grateful for. I was actually very angry that I had to move here. I didn't want to leave my friends. I didn't want to leave my family because all of our distance, like all of our extended family lived in Timmins as well. And so moving here meant moving away from my grandmother, from my grandparents, from my grandfather. And so like there was aunts and uncles, cousins. So moving here was really difficult. And so, and then when I came here, trying to adjust to a new school, my sisters didn't go to the same school as I did because of the division of the way that our school system, like our schools here worked, is that I was in the older grades, so I was in a different school. So I had to move. I had to move away from family. Then I had to go to school by myself without my sisters, and so they were able to, my sisters went to a different school entirely, so they went and did their own thing, and making new friends. So I was 10, almost 11, having to make friends in this new community. We lived, hey Christy, so we lived we moved into a rural community. And so when we first moved here, we moved in with another family and lived in their, they lived in a trailer park, so we moved into their trailer, and they had 3 kids at the time. I think they have 5 altogether. And so, so changing this, how are you doing, Christy? And so having to move and having to change and having an entirely, so it was like moving in with a different family. So there was like, we were 4 in our family, so there was 4 kids in our family. So we had 4 girls, plus they had 3 at the time, but I know that they had some other, I think they had 5 kids altogether. They had more kids after we left, or like as we got older. And so there was 7 kids living in this one little trailer with 4 adults, because there was my 2 parents and their 2 parents. And so that was really challenging. So we go from, hey, Sherry. So we go from being in our own home and area to being where we could actually walk. I can walk downtown. I can go and see my dad at work. I can go and I can walk over to my grandmother's, to being moved to what felt like the middle of nowhere. And this is where I'm still living now, is in this area. But it was like, so we moved into this area where it's like, which was really nice in the sense that we actually lived down by the lake. So we weren't very far away from the lake, but it was challenging. It was really challenging. So what was I, but what, so but the challenge, the question about the challenge is, today's question is, what are you grateful for about the place that you grew up? So now I can actually look back and say, well, I'm grateful for having had moved, because it allowed us to be able to connect with nature in a different way. Because when we moved out of that place, out of the trailer into our own place, we actually moved out into the country, and which again was really different, right? So I think we were probably 7 kilometers from town, maybe a little bit further, but it wasn't like we could just walk, right? So you had to actually go on the highway, and you had to go through the Hey Miranda, you actually had to go through the side roads, the back roads, and so there was a big, huge, long driveway that we needed to shovel. But one of the things that I was able to do is that I'm really grateful for, is that I could actually walk what was referred to as our block, which was a concession block, which is not like a house block or like a street block, but I can actually walk the entire block and have the opportunity to be able to like see different kinds of nature. Like I would have, where we actually lived, one of the places that we lived on, because we actually lived on two different houses on this road, and so, but it was down by the river, and the one house had like this great big humongous tree that I was able to climb up into and read my book. And so that was like my experience of being able to like literally climb into a tree and read a book and really connect with nature. I loved being able to climb into just the way that the tree branches were going up, is that I actually was able to actually climb in and be one with the tree and read. And I read, loved reading. That was one of the things my mom would send me into my room to go and clean up. And next thing you knew, then she'd come and check on me to see how I was making out in my room, and my room was not done, but I was reading. And so I got into a lot of trouble for reading growing up. And what was really interesting is that my son, he would actually get into trouble for reading. So we would actually go out to the park, and I would actually, so at one point, some little old lady, we were at the park, and the one old lady looked at me like really, really strange, because I walked over to him and I took his book and I said, if I catch you reading again, you're going to be grounded. And the lady just kind of looked at me really strangely, and I'm like, no, I really need him to go play. We're in the park. I need him to go play. He just loves to read, and I'm glad and thankful that he actually read a lot. But I know that he definitely got that from both his dad and I. Both of his dad and I read a lot, and I'm very thankful that both of my boys really enjoyed reading. So, except for that, when it was time to go play in the park, I needed him to be physical. He was my kid that wasn't very physical, so I needed him to be physical. Yes, and it was Christy. I loved my tree. That was my favorite place to be able to be. And then the other place that we actually lived in was like literally right along the river. And so again, being able to connect with trees and not knowing that that was what it is that I was going to be able to do, is that we lived right next. So if we actually went to our backyard and went down the slope, we would actually reach the river. And so that was so that spot there was my next spot where I was able to find my own space, my own place to be able to hang out, because I was the oldest of 4 kids, 4 girls, so I have 3 younger sisters. And so sometimes they just wanted to hang out with me, and I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to be able to do my own thing. I wanted to be able to read. And so one of the things is going down to the bottom of the river, and then I would actually walk up and cut into the other neighbor's yard. And cut across into the neighbor's yard and walk a little ways down their path. And then there was like a narrower spot where I was actually able to jump over across to the river. And again, I was on somebody else's property, but they didn't know. But it was right down by the end of the thing. And so like my sisters would come downstairs, and it's like, or down to the bottom of the hill, and it's like, well, I want to go with you. And it's like, no, I'm by myself. If you can jump the river, but I never ever told them how to be able to jump the river. So because I never showed them or told them how they were able to find that spot. And I don't even know what made me even look to find that spot, but it was like, but the across the way was it was surrounded by trees, and so like I was able to be shaded down by the water. I love the water. And so down by the water, and it allowed me to be able to, I can kick back against one of the trees, because that was one of the things that I really missed when we moved into that property, is that I didn't have that tree, I didn't have that space. And so I really enjoyed being able to do that. And so some of the things that I'm really grateful for by moving here is having had the opportunity to be able to connect to nature. So living in the city, was that it's a Northern Ontario city though, so like we got lots of cold, lots of so it's not like being down in Toronto or Ottawa or one of the bigger centers down in Ontario, but it was allowed me to be able to really connect to nature. So what am I grateful for about the places that I grew up, even though I was extremely angry that my parents moved us from where we lived, is that I was extremely thankful and grateful for having been able to connect with nature, where that's not something that would have happened had we have stayed where we lived in Timmins, because we lived in town. We lived in town. We were city kids, and like I said, I could walk to all of my cousins and friends and whatever. My grandparents lived in the middle of, like, out in the back of, they had country property. And so they lived behind the trailer park, and so they had a house behind. Like, it was really funny. They owned the property behind the trailer park. In front of their property was the trailer park, and you had to access it through the highway. So you had to actually drive into the trailer park to drive over to my grandparents. But they had tons and tons of property, but that's not where I connected, right? So I didn't necessarily, yeah, we went into the bush, yeah, we ended up doing things, they had really big garden, but it wasn't the same as being able to live there, where I could actually connect to the trees. And both properties, like I said, both properties in the country allowed me to be able to connect with those trees. And I lived out there until I went out on my own, and then lived in town, which was still, but it's still very rural. So like our in town where we live now is still very rural. And so I love that. I love that, the fact that I'm able to connect with nature, and that experience of moving allows me to be able to still stay connected to nature. Yes, lots of trees. So I have lots of trees, lots of water, lots of things around me. And eventually, one of the goals, my lifetime goal, is to actually own property right on the lake. But it will also have trees. It will be really important for me to still be able to have trees. So that is my my 30 days. Today's challenge is day 7, like I said, is, so that's my my feedback on today. So on today's challenge. So I'll actually post the in the group, like I'll post where the group is. So if you actually wanted to participate, because there's still I'm horrible with math. There's still 23 days left of the challenge, because it's a 30-day challenge. So if you actually want to participate in the challenge, the 30-day challenge, then I invite you to join us in our group. But in the meantime, I will keep coming back on and sharing every day, and giving my reflection on today's prompt for the 30-day challenge. And I will talk to you later. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me, Christy. I really appreciate that. Maybe if my mouse clicker would actually work, it would make things a lot easier when I say goodbye. Bye. See ya.